Welcome to the Prospective Doctor Podcast, where we will provide essential information for pre-medical students and those already in medical school. Listen each week for tips on how to improve your application and gain an acceptance to medical school.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Dr. Renee Marinelli, and today I have on the line Dr. Marinelli and Rao. Dr. Rao, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
So Dr. Rao is currently a senior resident in radiation oncology at Johns Hopkins, and she also went to medical school at Johns Hopkins University and received her undergraduate degree at Yale University. Dr. Rao has worked a lot with applicants that are pursuing degrees at top 20 or top tier university medical schools, and I wanted to just get your take a little bit today on the applicants that are pursuing some of the top tier medical schools and what makes them an ideal applicant for those types of schools. So let's start out, Dr. Rao. What type of applicant should apply to some top tiered schools?
Unfortunately, the MCAT and your grades and your GPA play a really big benchmark in whether or not some of these top tier medical schools will move your application on to the next cycle of screening. So although it doesn't represent your personality or your potential as a doctor, it's one of those checkboxes that are really the key to get through the gate for evaluation by the interview committee. So standard benchmarks that I try to tell my potential clients who are interested in applying to these schools are aiming for an MCAT in the 515 range, keeping the GPA at least above a 3.7, ideally is in the 3.8 unweighted GPA, and then avoiding having anything on the transcript that is any lower than a B minus, in particular in the challenging classes like Orgo, which tends to attract some attention when they review the application. Once those kind of things are met, the applicants that I feel really rise to the top are those that have kind of consistent interest in some sort of activity throughout their entire undergraduate experience. So specifically, like if you are doing research in something in neurosciences and you have had that experience for several semesters and shown continued interest in exploring that by working with patients in the hospital in the neurology floor, or through the elderly in the nursing home with a specific interest in dementia or something like that, that there's a cohesive story to your interest that makes you believable and demonstrates that true, genuine passion for this particular facet of medicine or the human experience. So applicants that have the grades as well as that kind of theme to their approach towards undergrad are the ones that I really strongly apply to the top tiered schools. If for some reason someone came into applying to medical school kind of late and maybe doesn't have the benefit of having all of those storylines for their personal application, then I tell them, go ahead and apply, but I'm not going to count those towards the minimum number of schools that I try to get my applicants to apply to. So for me, that number, when I applied to medical school, when I work with people who are applying to medical school, was 30. I try to get people to apply to that many schools if they have the time and the resources. And if for some reason they're interested in some of the other top tier schools, have a connection, have a home state, have a family member, friend that was there, then they can add it on. But I would still kind of keep that baseline number of the middle range or at range schools at 30 and just add on the other ones on top of that.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely see that a lot in some applicants that are reaching for top tier schools, but they don't apply to enough of the middle tier schools. And then they're really limiting their chances of getting an admission, period. So I definitely agree with that. If they have the grades and the MCAT score to shoot for some of those top tier schools, they definitely want to still distribute their application to some of the middle tier and even maybe some of the lower tier medical schools as well. You mentioned a lot of things that applicants should have on their application to be competitive at top medical schools. Anything else that the admissions committees are looking for in particular for these students?
I think that a strong sense of personal awareness as to why you want to go into medical school coming through in the personal statement can really catapult an application that may look like anything else to being a person that's applying, from paper to that person. And
Mm-hmm.
so I really encourage people to, when they're about to apply to medical school, maybe the year before, to go into their patient volunteer experiences with an active and open eye to really seeing what is it that they're enjoying about that experience. What do they see in the physicians or the nurse practitioners or the PAs or the researchers that they're working with that make them want to embark on this path? And in doing so, you end up having a clearer voice in your personal statement that really does make people rise to the top.
Yeah.
That is the number one thing. And then the strong letters of recommendation from the admissions committee side, when I've sat there, really appeal in particular to the attendings and the deans of admissions who spend time reviewing those applications. And one certain ways that people can try to demonstrate to put their best foot forward in those letters of recommendation are putting the right amount of time in selecting who those letter writers would be, and also offering to spend 30 minutes, perhaps an hour, going to lunch with one of your letter of writers. I did it for each one of the ones to try to make an appointment with them, to really talk to them, remind them of why you're going into medical school, have them refresh their memory on exactly the context of how they know you, if it's been maybe a couple of semesters since you may have taken a particular class with one of these professors or done a research project with them. So do what you can to have this really strong and personal letter of recommendation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point too. And I see a lot of people that get to this point in the application process now where they're actually applying and they just don't feel like they form those relationships with some of their professors. And so they hesitate on who they could ask. So just to echo that, forming that relationship and getting a good letter writer, you should definitely start that as early as possible in your undergraduate career. Start visiting these professors early on, going and talking to them and trying to maintain a relationship so that when it does come time to write a letter, like Dr. Rao said, you'll have these strong people that know you really well and then can really write an exceptional letter of recommendation for you. Dr. Rao, one question I get pretty commonly is, in order to receive an admission at a top tier university, is it necessary for the applicant to have a research publication?
I would say that it's not a requirement. It's definitely a bonus point. And what the publication is really sending the message of is a prolonged commitment to a particular research group and specifically a research question for which that person has been part of a team and has demonstrated strong capacity to work in a group, or even at the next level, ability to lead and troubleshoot and then draft and write and publish a manuscript on their own or an abstract at a conference. Those things, though, can be, maybe the timeline isn't going to work out for that to happen, but you can still keep these things in mind of what a publication really represents and try to embody those characteristics, that initiative, that attention to detail when approaching research. And those actions will not go unrecognized by research mentors. And then they can just write a particularly strong letter of recommendation for you.
Yeah.
In particular about the publication too, typically we think of that as being a manuscript in a journal, but I think these days it might be a really attainable goal for someone to try to present at a conference, or particularly a national conference for a medical or scientific community, which they may just submit, a one-page abstract and present a poster. And I think in and of itself, that's a really nice line to have on the activity and a really great experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Final question for you, Dr. Rao. Thank you so much for all this helpful information. I encounter a lot of applicants that want to go to a top tier medical school, I think just because of the name, and they recognize that it's a good school and maybe they went to a top tier or a really well-known undergrad university, but maybe they're not totally familiar with how going to a top tier school for medical school can really help their chances for residency. So does going to a top tier medical school help your residency application when it comes time to apply?
So I think it helps people if they end up being in the middle of the class of their medical school. If you're coming from a top tier medical school, people might be a little bit more likely to get an interview at a particular residency. But it's not, at the end of the day, when I look at the residency programs that I'm a part of, that my spouse and my friends here at Johns Hopkins are a part of. Our residency classes are not made up of students who came from all of the, name brand top medical schools. They're really groups of people who have whatever environment that they studied medicine in really scored well on their step ones, demonstrated a strong commitment to patient care, and did well on their particular shelves and on their rotations. So going to a top tier medical school is always helpful in maybe getting interviews when they're borderline candidates. But if the person in their medical school themselves excel and have strong letters of recommendation for the next step for residency, then with the right list of schools that for residency programs, when they apply to that the same way in medical school, the good residency position in the match will come. So like I said, so maybe it's helpful, but if it for some reason either the application acceptance doesn't happen or the finances are too strict, then you can still land a good residency position, a very good residency position coming from a lower tier or middle tier medical school, as long as the time spent there is well spent.
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Rao, for joining us. I really appreciate all the information. And for all the listeners out there, please keep us in mind if you are interested in applying to medical school, either to a top tier medical school or not. We have a ton of advisors that have just gone to excellent medical schools and have that experience working on admissions committees to really help you through the application. In our most recent cycle, we've had quite a few awesome acceptances to medical school. We had some acceptances to Johns Hopkins, Yale, Baylor, Cornell, tons of top tier medical schools and medical schools across the country as well. So we are definitely here to help you if you are interested in applying, and please feel free to contact us at any time. Thank you so much, Dr. Rao.
Thank you, everyone, and best of luck.
Our mission is to inspire, encourage, and inform students as you journey through a rigorous and intricate process of achieving your dreams in medicine. Visit us at perspectivedoctor.com for more essential resources in your medical school journey.